This is WFO Radio.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to WFO Radio, NHRA podcast. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We're on Twitch. And it is Thursday afternoon, 4 o'clock. That's when the show goes live. My name's Joe Costello, WFO Joe on Instagram and Twitter. And welcome to the show. We got a great show for you. I'm very excited. Another Thursday show, which means we're getting ready for the weekend. I picked this new schedule since we're all in quarantine dealing with this worldwide crisis. You know, you could want to work every second of every day, right? You could feel driven to do something of every second of every day to be productive. And certainly, but I want to signal the weekend is coming. I want you guys to think, man, when I start seeing some WFO stuff, that means the weekend is coming and there's some sort of transition to a racing themed time. Someday soon it will be racing. So on this show, we got a couple of great guests. He is a pro stock crew chief for the American Ethanol Racing team, but has got a vast knowledge in the world of motorsports. For Derek Kramer's team, talking about Michael Hiner, going to be on the show. And what has been very interesting is that Michael's been somebody I've wanted to have on WFO Radio podcast, our podcast feed we tell you about all the time. The live streaming deal is a little bit new. And we just were communicating about something we're mutually interested in, talking about Ferrari Formula One. And it slowly penetrated my skull. Like, this is the time to have Michael on the show, Joe. And so he's going to be on the show just seconds from now. Very knowledgeable, very cool person. And John DiBartlomeo from Drag Racing Edge magazine. Johnny D is in the green room as well. Drag Racing Edge has been very helpful to WFO Radio over the years, as have many people, of course. But they run an ad in Drag Racing Edge. They're a magazine, and they just did a great promotion. He's got a great column up right now about drag racing in the year 2050. What is it going to be like? And so we're going to speak with John DiBartlomeo. Of course, we'll open it up for your comments. If you're watching on Facebook Live, start a watch party. It's going to be about drag racing. It's going to be fun and entertaining. I will tell you, Friday cocktails. The past couple of weeks have been just tremendous. Wine night with Ron Tobler was great last week with Courtney Anderson, Jason Logan. But this weekend's Friday cocktails is going to be a little bit different. Daryl Gwynn, Miami's own Top Fuel star, Daryl Gwynn, a legend, is going to be the guest of honor. But what we're really going to do is delve into the history of drag racing in South Florida, in particular, Miami Hollywood Speedway. The tree that's in the background was off the starting line at Miami Hollywood Speedway. And people have always asked me, like, where'd you get it? What is that? Is that real? Is it from the starting line? You know, that looks kind of old. Maybe you should get a new one. And it's like, no, man, that's a piece of history, my own drag racing history and the history of so many. We're talking about Jungle Jim Lieberman, the Coca-Cola cavalcade of funny cars, just crazy things. So we're going to have Daryl Gwynn and some other guests who he doesn't even really know about, which is kind of the hallmark of the Friday cocktails. Nobody knows who else is going to show. And so we encourage you to show at 4 o'clock, or you could always watch in the replay. And it's in the WFO Radio app. Speaking of WFO Radio, it is brought to you by some great sponsors, people who have made it possible for us to be on the air, like Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. We had Lake Speed on. They've got a webinar that went on today, and it was free for everyone, but it's just educational about the importance of piston rings. People think, man, I got a turbocharger. I don't need to worry about anything else. And that's not the way it works. Plus, they're giving 20% off on tools, on rings, on all kinds of great stuff. So it is very cool. Also, Frank Hawley's Drag Racing School, the Dragster Adventure, or get your Supercomp Super Gas license. I saw Camry Caruso was getting educated down at Frank Hawley's Drag Racing School, which is very cool. They are educating the next generation of champions in the world of NHRA drag racing. We appreciate them. The Dragster Adventure is what I think you might be interested, like pool, pond might be good for you. But also the Dragster Adventure might be good for you because you get to drive a dragster, show up with nothing, and go out and compete and feel like a drag racer in a one-day thrill show experience. Great stuff. Something a little more serious is samtech.edu. Having a conversation with Brian Massengill about Factory Stock Showdown and our Factory Stock podcast we produce. More episodes coming soon. But really, it's about the next generation of engine builders and machinists. So the people you're about to hear from, maybe they didn't even have the option to go to a place like Samtech and get head start on everybody in terms of education and racing, et cetera. They do a great job. Also, Marvin Rodak, Rodak's Coffee and Grills.com, the hot sauces and the spice rubs, but really it's all about the coffee. And I started today off with a little Rodak's coffee, and so I'm amped up. That's how I go WFO. Give Marvin a call, 817-924-6821. Don't forget, tomorrow we'll be talking about Miami Hollywood Speedway Park, Darrell Gwynn, South Florida drag racing, the Miami drag racing scene, the stars that came through, the history of the place, and really, was it a rival to Southern California? Well, in many ways, it could have been. Our population was so much smaller, though, maybe per capita. All right, that's what's coming up tomorrow. But right now, bringing on to the show, the man we introduced at the very beginning. He's the crew chief of the American Ethanol Pro Stock team, several wins under his belt, great drag racing history, loves all forms of racing, Mr. Michael Hiner. Mike, welcome to WFO.
What's up, Joe?
How are you?
I'm good, bud. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm so glad you reached out about Vettel yesterday, and my phone blew up because of Ferrari Formula One. And I don't know, drag racing or racing in general can sometimes be siloed, where drag racers only like drag racing and NASCAR guys only like NASCAR. But I have found that the people that work in the sport monitor everything, and that within drag racing we've got some really passionate Formula One people, and you have revealed that you are one of those people.
I am. Actually, Rob Downing's another one. Rob and I often talk about Formula One, probably as much as we talk about drag racing. Dr. Philip Service, the track doctor, he and his nurse Leanne are also big Formula One fans. So it's fun. It's fun to be at the racetrack racing and then talking about other forms of racing.
Yes, and from your standpoint as a crew chief, the technical side of things, the problem solving, interested side of things, I'm sure Formula One is viewed upon as the pinnacle. But give me your perspective.
Well, absolutely. I mean, first off, the budgets, right? I mean, we all know that money wins things, and money in Formula One is far beyond anything that even when I worked in NASCAR, like we weren't even close to the same levels of expenditure. But what you can do with the technology that and the engineering that goes in ultimately filters down. I mean, Matt Hartford and Total Seal is a prime example. Matt's involved with Formula One teams, and we see that technology eventually make it to drag racing, to NASCAR. And yeah, I mean, we're all in awe of what those guys can do with the parts that they manufacture, right? That they don't buy very much. So
they don't buy very much. No, they design and make it, and we rarely get to see it. I got a little nervous, though, when you started mentioning Total Seal, because, just being able to say that they're involved with Formula One was dicey. And the idea that, like, to me, that makes it cool to have been there. Drag racing, I love drag racing, but I'm in drag racing and I see drag racing. It's kind of like the unknown world over there, but that they do some things over there is very impressive to me, and that we can benefit.
Yeah, and I'm a fan, right? So I mean, I get the occasional email from the keyboard warriors wanting to know why I don't get more excited after a win, and I mean that just goes back to my dad and a lot of things he told me when I decided to get into racing, which he didn't want me to. But I think that looking how Formula One has been something that there's so many people, both NASCAR, when I worked there, were into Formula One in the early 2000s, late 90s. And now in drag racing, we're starting to find our people around, found Doc and Leanne, obviously Rob Downing and those guys. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. And Snake, we could get Snake in on our crew. Like if we do a watch party somewhere, we have to invite Snake because he's a big Formula One guy as well. Always has paid attention. There's some great photos of him and Niki Lauda out there. Now we do, just so you know, I don't know if you've done any of these out there. I'm excited about it, but we do have people are watching. They're on Facebook. They're on YouTube. I'm encouraging them to start watch parties, but they can comment. If there's a relevant comment, I'll put it up. Like Johnny says, Vettel out at Ferrari, Sainz in, Ricardo also switching teams. I'm not against Vettel being out. Sainz being in, that's what prompted your text. It was like, it's not a sexy deal. They must think Leclerc is like really the number one of the future, which is fine. But I loved Vettel, but really, I think he did not realize his potential at Ferrari. Of course, it's tough when you got Lewis over there doing his thing.
It is, and I think if you look back, though, it started with Fernando Alonso. How did Alonso not win a championship at Ferrari after winning with Renault and being fast, obviously, with McLaren? It continues, and I'm being a huge Ferrari fan. I want to see the drivers' championships. I want to see the championships for the team, obviously, because that's where the money's at. But it just seems to me like there's something missing in for the red team, and we can win races. We can get up there and scrap. Obviously, Mercedes has kind of a stranglehold on it through the engineering. Ross Brawn, obviously.
Yeah.
But going back to the Sainz pick, the thing to me is if you look at Sainz with Hulkenberg at Renault, I kind of thought Hulkenberg had the upper hand on him, and then Hulkenberg gets moved out for Ricardo. And then, so, if you're Ferrari, is Sainz really the one versus somebody like Ricardo who's won races? I mean, you got Leclerc that's won 2 races. You got a 4-time champ and Vettel that you're pushing out the door. And so going into next year, you've got, and I say win, I say Formula One wins. Obviously, these guys have all won at lower levels. So they've, but, I don't know I don't know the behind the scenes, but if I'm picking, I would probably be leaning more towards Hulkenberg or towards Ricardo if I was Ferrari.
Well, exactly. If I'm thinking about Vettel, like I love Vettel, and Vettel is great. I got nothing against Vettel, but Vettel has had, and don't worry, folks, we're going to talk some drag racing and go in depth with Michael about pro stock and what it takes, his career, etc. But Vettel has, when the spotlight, he's first of all 4-time champ, of course, had that great run with Braun and everything, but or Red Bull, excuse me. And when the pressure has been most intense, him and Lewis wheel to wheel, it just felt like there's always a mistake made. And you can go into the real Tifosi message boards and see people like listing like this lap, this race, this moment, this was the circumstance, this was the mistake. And they really begin to add up. And then when you see Vettel talk about his Formula One career, he says things like, I have other things in my life that I appreciate. The whole world isn't Formula One. Like he'll say things like that, which, yes, that is true. That's a great bit of wisdom, but you got to win a world championship in the red car, man. You got to do it. And so I think that they have maybe determined with all this stuff that, it's time to get younger. Finances is probably a situation, even with Ferrari, like right now, given the circumstances of the world and economy. They might be looking to save a little coin, considering what has happened in Italy, et cetera. So I don't know. I guess, we're all along for the ride on that one. So we're going to just watch.
Well, it's hard to, with anything, it's hard to justify $40 million. I don't know if it's in pounds or dollars, but 40 million of anything is a lot, right? So
yeah.
To try to bring somebody like that back, and obviously Vettel's got the experience, but he flat said he doesn't want to develop a car. So you're not going to see him in a midfield team. If he's not at Ferrari, Red Bull, or Mercedes, he's out. I mean, and being in the sport and being, or not in F1, but being in motorsports in general, and knowing what the load is, and we do it within the States, and it's relatively easy. I can't imagine trying to have a family and fly to every corner of the world. And so I can see how somebody like that can get burnt out. I don't begrudge him anything from walking away. I would have liked to seen him win in a Ferrari. Hopefully this year, maybe he can do it, right? We still have races left to go this year. So, he still has the opportunity to win one. But 100% he's got to clean up the silly mistakes. He doesn't reckon, and Hockenheim, and we might be having a completely different conversation about, a world championship for Ferrari with Vettel.
And when you have Lewis Hamilton on the other side, one of the greatest of ever, he's going to make you pay for every one of those mistakes. And that's what we've seen. Some others out there. We got Illinois checking in, Zapp's checking in, Jody's checking in, Tim Roach used to race at Miami Hollywood checking in.
A great photo.
Which one?
Roach, I think.
Zapped? This guy?
Yeah. Or yeah.
Well, you
Zapped,
you can see everybody, and we've got a loyal audience out there. We switched the show. The show is still available on podcast. We have podcast listeners out there that are telling me don't ever stop with the podcast because they listen while they work or do what they do. But this has definitely given us a live feedback formula, which has been pretty cool. Marvin Rodak says, go pro stock. Yeah, big pro stock fan out there. Let's talk about your background, though. and how you got to this point as crew chief for Kramer Racing. You guys have had some race wins, you've had some success, and it's a team that is still relatively new. So we've had this conversation, but let's bring it all together in that when the Kramers decided they were going pro stock racing, they're going to do it, take the plunge from comp and their great racing background. You were the guy that got the gig. How did that all work?
Well, it's funny you say that because it's actually through V Gaines. Dave and Derek decided to buy V's old car, and Madcap was doing the motors, who Dave has had a relationship with prior, who still has a relationship with Joe Jolly, but now Bob Reinhardt's running the shop there, but they do his comp stuff. I had raced with V and Clyde when I was at Krischer's, and they were renting motors from KRJ, which was Jimmy, Oliver, and Rocky. And so over the years, as Clyde and I've talked and stuff, I've gone and been a second set of eyes a couple times for him. He's helped me quite a bit, obviously, in my career. So when Dave bought the stuff, Clyde calls me and says, "Hey, this guy's going to call. We want you to go help him, for Denver. Don't let him kill his kid. They don't, they run automatics, not clutches. So they're just going to need a little bit of guidance, but the racers, in the end, they're successful, and they should pick up on it pretty quick." So I went, actually Matt Hartford and Gary Schmiske, Taylor's dad, they went up to Denver and they helped Derek get his license. And then, because I was unable to go, actually at that point, I thought I was done with drag racing. When Watson quit racing in 2010, my son was born. And my wife was promoted to CFO of the hospital. So really me being gone was going to be a difficult time for the family. So anyway, Clyde calls, says, "Help this guy." Sure, whatever. So I go and I help him, and we did okay up there. Everybody was learning each other, and I was ready to call it one and done. And Dave said that he wanted me to stay on and help him, and I was kind of waffling back and forth. And then V Gaines called, and when you get the call from the Godfather that says, "Hey, you're going to do this," and you smile, say yes, sir, kiss the ring, and move on out the door. So. It's been actually it's the longest I've worked anywhere with any particular race team, and that was July of 2012. So we're coming up on 8 years, and Derek and I have a fantastic relationship. Dave's really good to work for. He and I have had some raised voices over some conversations, but great part of it all is it's racing. It's in the heat of it, and we both want the best for the race team. And so it's been an interesting ride over the last 8 years.
No, it's great. And watching, you've been brought in on the Factory Stock Showdown team, and that car's fast and things are happening. What I marvel at is that this is a secret society, just like everything else. Like you mentioned Gary, you mentioned Matt, they're helping out Derek, the training of the clutch car. Like I've heard that story. It's the circle of knowledge that is going on out there in pro stock. It's a very limited amount of people that can do this at all. Where did that start? I know you had some go-karting experience. Is that you?
That's me. Yeah, that's in Hiner, South Carolina, and Jimmy Griffin was other guy there. We worked for Phantom Racing Chassis. That was I had actually worked in drag racing for Mark Powick in the late 90s. And then went to work for Harold Wiggins with I went to NASCAR from Powick's, and then at the 41 car with Steve Grissom, and
I remember
Steve Grissom, and then went from there to Phantom. Was there for several years. Good friends with Harold Wiggins, still good friends with him. He comes to Charlotte because they live close by, obviously, and so. It's I love motorsports. I love competition. I love football. I love baseball. Even though you got that Yankees crap hanging in the background there.
Right. That's right. We're going to win it all again this year, even if there is an asterisk for short season.
But it's I could be happy with junkyard cars out in a field somewhere, and let's figure it out. What can we do to go faster? Air pressure, camber, caster, springs. Let's just rip the bodies off and see what we can do to make these things go faster. So, but my background's actually not cars. Even though my dad raced growing up, my background's in computers. My dad's second hobby outside of motorsports was computers, and so I went to school for computer science. When I graduated high school, I went to Akron U and immediately started working in an IT department in a medical billing company. So, I took kind of a weird route to get to motorsports because I'm not a gearhead. I'm not somebody that's, as Marcus Svensson, who I worked with at Marnell's, used to say, well, you've never had to pull a freeze plug out, of a block in the middle of winter to fix it. And that's true. I've come from more of the analytical side, did a lot of CNC work at Ultra Pro Machining, in between with Clements Automotive down in South Carolina, which Glenn's son's running Xfinity stuff now, which he was little when I was helping out down there. And I've had a lot of fun over the years and got to do a lot of very cool stuff. Can't complain.
There it is. Oh, and what I like is being around smart people. That's me. I hear. I'm always trying to get better as a person, as someone with knowledge, increase my knowledge. My father always taught me that. He's 77 years old. He's always reading and everything. You do enough interviews with drag racers, they eventually sound the same. Like, how do you be successful? Surround yourself with people that are very smart, smarter than you. Surround yourself with great people. And so one of the elements that I love so much about our sport of drag racing is like everybody, like not everybody, but a lot of really smart people are out there. And you scratch the surface and you learn something. Like, you just kind of hang around and listen to people and you learn something. And then you put them in a competitive situation and the best possible stuff comes out. So it's very interesting. That's why I'm excited. But it's also a lot of fun. You've got a nickname out there. Like, people have, it was Drew Skillman who told me you got a nickname out there. You want to share it?
I assume he's going for Bobby Hill.
Bobby Hill.
Yeah.
There he is.
Yeah. So when I worked at Krishers, let me run through this real quick. So when I started in drag racing, I worked for Mark Powick in the 90s. Dave Butner was there as crew chief. Marcus Svensson, who runs stock and has been around, crew chief for Marnell later, which is how I got back into drag racing. Learned tremendous amount from him. Still throw a lot of stuff off the wall. With some of the European drag racing, European pro stock that he's involved in, because they still get to play with carburetors, which I'm not opposed to, by the way. I love EFI. I wish we'd have gone to EFI in the 90s. As much as I hate to sound like Warren Johnson, we should have done it a long time ago.
Oh, we should have. It was one of the great blunders, but whatever.
Yeah. So, but I mean, for me, I went, I was around those guys, and Mark taught me a lot about the business of motorsport. Even though I was young and way too cocky for what I actually knew, I thought I knew a lot more than I did. My dad probably said it the best: the older you get, the less you know, and that's kind of how I'm going along. But from there, got to work in NASCAR. Had a really great conversation one time with Ray Evernham, and he says the reason we're successful is because we have people that are really good at their jobs, and I can take all that information, and I'm not as smart as all of them, but I can take all that information and make a big picture out of it. And that kind of sank in. It didn't make, when you're 20 to 21, 20, 21, 22, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But now looking at how our team operates with, Dave, obviously, with KB, with Chris Vang, I mean, and we had Dwayne Radcliffe a few years ago, that kind of sinks in. Then went back, crew chief at Marnell's was Marcus Svensson. They brought Greg Anderson in, which is how I got hooked up with Greg. Worked with him for a while. Actually stayed at his house when he was down in Jacksonville, and for because we work crazy hours because that's what Greg does. And
right, Minnesota all the time.
Yeah, and then I got to work with Ricky Smith from there at Krishers. And then when Ricky left, Ron felt confident enough to, I shouldn't say that. Ron asked me if I could make decisions. I told him they may not be the right decisions, but decisions are easy, right? I mean, you can make the decision. It's knowing when to alter that decision for something better. So from there, obviously, with Clyde and V at Western and at Madcap. Worked for Ben Watson, who I got to say, while we never had the success on the racetrack, the amount of effort that guy put into building his own stuff. Like, he wanted to build his own manifold, so he figured it out. He wanted to port his own cylinder heads, had a Spintron. Like, he put all this work in, and he did it himself. He didn't hire experts. He didn't hire these people to come in and do stuff. He wanted to do it himself. So if he was successful, it was out of his own doing. So, we learned a lot. We may not have ran fast, but I mean, the 4-link stuff, the clutch stuff, he bought a clutch dyno. We really got to play with that. I was never really involved with the motor stuff, but the technology side of things that Watson was into with him and his dad, that's really the catalyst that is helping me today. I still refer to notes of stuff that Ben and I did back, in 2005, 2006, when we first went to beadlocks. The stuff we tried surprisingly still works today. I mean, and once we have power, and Ben and I've had this conversation. If we had, not that I'm not saying that we were lacking anything, but with more power, we could have been more competitive, because I mean, frankly, some of the stuff we're doing now, we did then. It's just we're smarter about applying it.
It only works if you've got the power, which is why that's so important. Some people are asking some questions, and so we're going to mix in a couple of questions in terms of pro stock. Like, people are asking, Marvin Rodak wants to know about like camshafts and stuff. Like, on a pro stock engine, you already said you're not like the engine guy, but more of it's funny how the sport has come to you, right, with your computer knowledge. Like, you just hung out, and all of a sudden, like, everything's computers, and I agree. But like on parts in a pro stock car, like camshaft, like, they last how long?
Well, I suppose that would depend on who you ask, obviously, and it's going to depend on the material the camshafts made
and the budget that you have to replace these kind of things, etc.
Right. In the end, I mean, pro stock Alan Johnson used to say it's cubic dollars. That's what makes this world goes round, and it's fact. I mean, that would be more of a question for Jason. I couldn't Greg. I couldn't really say that there's a specific run number. I think probably at this point, it's more about cycling stuff out and getting an idea of what we want to, what we don't want to have is something break, and they know where we're at with this stuff, so they can cycle it out before we get to that. And we have very, very few problems with the KB motors.
Right. And Mark says, like, pro stock engine tolerances, are they like F1 engines where you have to preheat the engine? Like, there is a whole mechanism that goes through pro stock for Formula One engines. Do you have to do things like that with pro stock now?
Yeah, typically everything's warmed up, and obviously we race in a lot of different situations, but everything has to be warmed up. The motor has to be a certain temperature before we start it. You don't want to score the cylinder wall because you started it cold. So yeah, it's not as bad as Formula One. We also have to be careful how cold we get the motor, because after we warm them up, then we want cold water in a warm engine because that makes the most power. So we're very mindful of what we're doing both in warm up and cool down.
Very, very interesting. Mike Hiner is with us here on WFO Radio Live, talking a little motorsports of all kinds, and pro stock in particular, something that is very near and dear to my heart. Now, you mentioned Jason Line, and I talked about that like circle of knowledge, right? Jason Line is in the circle of knowledge. It's a real bummer. This was his last year, and it's being kind of shortened and weirded by our coronavirus situation. But he is an interesting character, and you factored in big to the positive outcomes in his life.
Well, let me address something first before he gets any chance to say anything else. He's telling people that I'm running him out of the sport, and that is not happening. I am definitely not running him out of the sport. Now, he said, let's see, I'm needy. I require way too much maintenance and a lot of other things. But the truth of the matter is, right now since we have equal power since 2018, right? So
yeah, what's out of the head? You and Jason.
Okay. I believe it's 6-5. At least that's what the PR lady has sent me.
Yes.
I asked her to look it up, and she says We are 6-5 currently. Unfortunately, we're 0-1 against him this year, but
only 2
yeah, Phoenix. Well, Phoenix and Pomona, unfortunately I was still in test mode, not enough race mode, and that hurt Derek's teeth more than it hurt me. So
yeah, saw that.
But yes, we're 6-5 against Jason. So yeah, if he were to stop today, I've had a winning record with equal power. So yeah, we can call the end of the line tour now.
Speaking of Sadie, who I asked her to send me a couple of photographs. You sent some photographs, but she sent this one and wants you to know it's from her.
Yeah, so in Pomona, she was walking around with her camera. I said, "What, you want me to pose?" And that's what I did.
That's it. We got that.
Yeah,
and we got that. One or the other.
Show me the money. Well, you should ask her. You should ask her for the picture when I tried to run her over with the golf cart, and she kept snapping pictures as I kept getting closer, not realizing what was about to happen.
There it is, and she got run over. Now, what about this one? You sent me this one. What's the significance?
I sent you that one. So that was when I worked for Powix, and I believe that was 97.
That's you. You're the
Summit.
The cover.
That's 100 pounds ago and a whole lot more hair. But yeah, that was a Nest Firebird there, which was an absolutely awesome car. But I worked at a motor shop then. I wasn't actually working on the road crew then. I worked for my dad in the motor shop, and they showed up, and unfortunately, it was one of those deals. Have you ever seen the cartoons where everybody disappears and there's one guy left?
Yes.
Well, they came in with all the camera stuff, and I don't know, what am I, 21 when they were taking those pictures, and everybody disappears, and it's me and nobody else left in the shop, and the guy comes around and says, "We're ready to take pictures," and they're like, "You need to put on a Summit shirt." So I ended up putting on the polo shirt and stood out there for like 2.5, 3 hours doing different things, and that's the picture they ended up using. So that's kind of
your modeling career. You could be in a guild of some sort. I'm so annoyed when people run away from the microphones or the attention. Don't you realize that that's how we make the sport bigger and how people get famous in front of cameras and microphones? Get in there, man. And look, here we are years later. You're still the star of the cover.
Well, it's as simple as this. It's people, yes, from the racer side of things, it's racing. We want to be into it. We want to do it, but it's sports entertainment. We have to have the money to go. So whatever makes that more friendly for the fans, the more fans there are, the more money they are for us to be able to do what we do. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of money. And guys like Kramer and V and Ken Black and Brian Crowdy and I have had this conversation several times. Brian lives about 40 minutes from me, and we often fly on the same flights and get stuck at the same airports and end up renting cars and driving home together and arguing about suspension versus solids. You need a solid rear end. Your whole problem is you guys run shocks on that thing. Well, no, Brian, it's not. But hey, it's
I like that.
It's the fuel guys versus the NA guys, right?
Yeah. Well, elaborate on that, because I think that most people have the impression that fuel guys are thinking about fuel and they don't think about pro stock at all. And pro stock guys are thinking about pro stock and they don't think about fuel at all. But really, all drag racers communicate with one another at some point, like you said, on the plane. And I love the idea that there's a little bit of a rivalry. Of course, I love them all, but I love pro stock because as a sportsman racer, bracket racer, pro stock was something that I genuinely felt was something to aspire to. Like, wow, the factory hot rods, man, those are the cars that I could maybe get. Whereas the nitro cars, guys exploding and fires and stuff, I was like, I don't know if I could relate to that. But talk a little bit about that, and in pro stock in particular, it is underappreciated.
Well, it's interesting because frankly, Brian and I, not all the time, and I won't say it's a run by run deal, but when the track gets questionable, the first guy up kind of can give me a heads up. So on Sundays, I may ask Brian a couple questions. Hey, what did you see on the starting line? And obviously the starting line's not nearly as important to them, where the first 10 feet to us is the run, right? I mean, that's the majority of the run is the first 10 feet because we're launching this car without any additional power adder. So, anything you can gain over Erica or Jag or Greg and Jason. And in my case, I ended up racing Hartford a lot. But I mean, Chris McGahey, who's one of the guys I always want to beat, it's something that if you can get just a inkling, 100 RPM, a half a gram, a tenth of a pound of air pressure, a quarter inch or eighth inch of wheelie bar, something. So Brian can give me a heads up. And likewise during qualifying, when we go before those guys, I may tell him, hey, I think the track's an 8, right lane showing just a little bit of concrete, but I think you're good. It looked okay at 60. And obviously after 60 foot, there's no real difference between their cars and our cars, but they're still trying to transverse that first 60 feet. So it's a lot of information that we can give each other.
Yeah, I think that's great to know. And I have been fortunate, Matt and Total Seal invited me in last year to do some just like working on car type things. And NHRA has tweeted them out. One went out yesterday where we built a Liberty transmission, and it was nerve wracking, man. And just to think, you're mentioning, weight on clutch and those decisions that separate victory from defeat, or like you mentioned, Derek's teeth. I had forgotten about like how bad you guys were rattling the tires. Like it was a vicious shake. And there's a guy in there,
It was.
a guy that, not just you, by the way, there was a couple of, it was, you said you guys were testing and you were going through some stuff, but that decision-making in crunch time, under pressure, with victory and defeat being the outcome, and obviously a little pain in that case, like that's what makes it interesting for the people who understand it.
It's to the point where Derek wears a mouth guard. He doesn't trust me. He says I've knocked out a couple of his fillings already, and he better protect himself. And it's hard. I don't think fans realize how close it is between a super fast run and a run that doesn't make it a foot. Like these cars are super finicky, and guys within the sport. I mean, you can talk to Matt and Eddie. Eddie will never turn down free help. So anytime you want to go over there, he'll be more than happy to put you to
that's
work.
what they said.
Yeah. That's right in Eddie's wheelhouse, right? I mean, that's the East Coast guy coming out and Labor, come on, you can do this.
No, but you laugh because the whole thing started out. I'm in a bar and they're like, "Yeah, we got to change valve springs tomorrow. You should come by." And that's exactly what it was. And I said, "Because I'm not afraid. I will call you bluff to see where you're coming from." Like, all right, yeah, let's see how it goes. And so next thing you know, we're over there with the social media team, and I'm changing a valve spring. And so once we got into that, I'd like, okay, are you guys serious about this? You can let the announcer touch the car?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we got it. No big deal. And the rest of history, it's some very popular bits out there on NHRA social media. But it did start with Eddie, like, throwing it out there.
Yeah. Well, and thankfully we're all in a position to where we have experienced guys. Like I've been around Eddie for years, and most of the pro stock,
Eddie Granacci,
as far as the guys that Eddie Granacci, and most of the guys like Mark Ingersoll, and I go back years. His dad raced, my dad raced. When I first came back into the sport, Mark was one of the guys that was there with his arm around me saying, "Let's go get a drink." Unfortunately, it was an Alan Johnson's company van too many times, but there's a lot of guys. Rick Jones, obviously, forever. Ricky grew up around it. Rob Downing, forever. Right after Butner at Powix, Rob was in. Rob raced himself. So there's a lot of guys that have been around it for a long time. So it makes it fun. And when anytime we can drag you into it and say, hey, look, this is what we're doing. There's no, I can't say there's no real secrets. Everybody has the same parts, right? I mean, for the most part, we're all dealing with the same thing. There's a few engineering things here and there, but this is more of a gentleman's sport. When I came over from NASCAR, when I worked in NASCAR, Robert Presley's brother, Charlie, was crew chief of the 41 car. Charlie told us if we didn't go through the inspection line with 20 things wrong, we weren't trying hard enough. Now, try to find 20 things to cheat on in a car every week. Now, I worked in a motor shop, so I didn't have to deal with it like the guys in the car shop, but I mean, and Charlie's theory was if the tech guys find 10 things, you get 10 things through. And so we've accomplished something, right? We've cheated 10 times. When I come back over to drag racing, my whole mentality is like, this is what we do, right? We just don't even live in a gray area. We go for what they can't find, what we can do. And this was much more of a, okay, this is a gentlemanly thing. Yes, there's gray areas in the rule book, but we're going to go with the intention of things, and we're not going to push. We're not going to push what we can't do. And So we're all now working with the same parts. Essentially, we're all kind of within the same box. It's just a matter of what we're doing with those parts that make it. When the car is right, and I say right, it takes a lot to make a car right, but all the cars out there right now are fairly equal. When the car is right, 90% of the run is engine, right? So the car has to be right, but you're still 90% of the run. So Jason reminds me of that often. He hated that the first time I said it, but now he'll come by. He'll be like, "Don't mess with me. Remember, it's 90," and then he walks away. So
that's great. Well, we're all going to miss him as a driver in the sport. And this year has been a bummer because we all miss the sport. But Michael, I appreciate you coming on WFO. Any final thoughts about Pro Stock, about the fact that, we're obviously on pause. We're looking forward to get going. You know that story every day. Like, when are we going to get going? We don't know when we're going to get going, but we will eventually get going. At some point, that they're going to figure this thing out, and I can't wait to be out there. But for fans of Pro Stock, fans of drag racing, any final thoughts? Any final message? You want to take a shot at Jason? Do it.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Jason and Chris. I hope Chris doesn't try to retire like Jason did, because Mason's going to start driving. I want Chris to stay out a little bit longer. I haven't got enough chances to try to beat him. Jason, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess it depends how you look at it, is still going to be around a little bit. I do want to say that I'm sorry, Cindy, I am terribly sorry I introduced you guys. I really thought that it was just a matter of getting Jason away from the Pontiac girl at the bar. And I had no clue that you guys were going to get married and have a couple beautiful kids and end up out in the middle of nowhere with goats in North Carolina. So, sorry, Cindy. It's a long way from Southern California, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny that, the introduction story is a cute one, and you should be happy because that's a great little family over there. Like that's we can help out the world by creating good little families with kids, and Jason's kids are both fantastic and getting involved. And so that's the next wave. Yeah. It's going to keep drag racing going. Michael, thank you very much. What we'll do is, if you're cool with it, we'll talk Formula One on a semi-regular basis once we get going again, maybe do some watch parties, etc.
Yeah, hey, I'm game. Anytime for an opinion. I'm full of all kinds of opinions. Just ask my wife.
There you go. Well, Forza Ferrari. Let's hope we get some wins. And good luck next time we see you guys at the track. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, there he goes. Michael Hiner, crew chief for American Ethanol, Pro Stock. And Derek and Dave Kramer. We didn't talk any Factory Stock Showdown right there. But then again, that's like something that would be on Factory Stock Podcast, brought to you by samtech.edu. Hey, I want to remind everybody before we bring John DiBartlomeo on, Johnny D from Drag Racing Edge magazine, that you can get some WFO Radio stickers if you send a self-addressed stamped envelope to P.O. Box 848-353, Pembroke Pines, Florida 33084. And if you understand what a self-addressed stamped envelope is, which a lot of people don't, I'm a little shocked at it. Like, it used to be all about sending the self-addressed stamped envelope, and I will put some WFO Radio stickers in there, and then you will have them for your ride or your toolbox or whatever you want to do with them, because at that point, they will be yours. WFO Radio stickers. Hey, I also want to mention WFO Radio t-shirts. The WFO Radio t-shirt is available at nitrofishracing.com. There's the WFO shirt. There's the Erica Enders World Champion shirt. And Randy Lynn over there at Nitrofish Racing has done such a great thing. WFO 20, you get 20% off. WFO 20% off the WFO Radio t-shirt. 10-year anniversary, 10 years of podcasting at nitrofishracing.com. WFO 20. Say what? Absolutely. It's amazing. And it's crazy that Randy Lynn and Bo are working so hard to help the sport of NHRA drag racing. All right, speaking of drag racing and someone who has helped the sport a lot over the years, he is a Division I Hall of Famer. He is the editor of Drag Racing Edge magazine and many magazines over the years, and has done it all, seen it all, been there for everything except what we're going through now. Mr. John DiBartlomeo. Johnny D, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
Hey, Joe, how are you?
Good. Michael Hiner.
We're surviving.
You're surviving. Michael Hiner did.
I got a question for Michael.
Yes, he's not. He's no longer on cam. But what would the question be? Maybe we get him back.
Why is he in drag racing? He should be in Formula One.
Exactly. Hey, Michael, are you aware that you're on? Because he wants to know why you're not in Formula One. Johnny D says, how come a smart guy like you made the bad decision?
Sorry, I missed that.
No, Johnny D says, well, how come a smart guy like you is in drag racing? Go, Johnny.
Come on,
All right,
Michael.
I think
You
I
need
got
to be in
audio back.
Formula One. What are you doing in drag racing?
Well, I actually had the opportunity when Jaguar bought Jackie Stewart's team in '99 and in 2000. I was approached by a friend of mine that was going over there and said, "Why don't you come over?" Which I was getting married. My wife has lived on the same street her whole life, so it's I knew it wasn't a realist. I could have actually been over there in different world, different time, I suppose.
Wow. How things would have been different. Let's see. Jaguar got bought by who?
Man, the audio.
Yeah,
Joe, I lost you, bro.
no big deal. But anyway, we got the one question in, so that was good. Johnny D, look at you taking over the interview role. That's very impressive. But now it's our time, John. Drag Racing Magazine, you got a new edition out there. You were going to send me the logo. It didn't work out. I didn't get it. But everybody knows Drag Racing Edge magazine. It's a real magazine that you get and you actually read. And you guys have been doing some great stuff. You've put out a column this week talking about drag racing in 2050. But you've never seen anything like this. None of us have. So let's get your take.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on, because when my blog went out, it went out with a software-enhanced photo of myself with a big beard and a pair of glasses, and I looked like I was 96 years old in 2050, which I hope to be. Okay. But no, it was a little tongue-in-cheek kind of piece I just thought about writing that, looking back, if we're in 2050, looking back 30 years to 2020, I mean, did drag racing die this year? I don't know. I hope I don't think it will. But it was just a little piece we just decided to put together.
Yeah, well, it's worth thinking about. It's worth thinking about. There you go. That's you. That's you in 50 years, Johnny D. Who are you mixed with right there?
When I saw that picture, I feel like Tim Allen in Santa Claus, when he grew the beard, and he held up, he was in a doctor's office and the doctor said, "Well, you gained a little weight." And he said, "You call this a little weight?"
Yeah, exactly. We are in we've never been here before as a society, Earth, humanity. Certainly, there have been flus and pandemics in the past. We've learned about the Spanish flu in like 1918, World War I era. Here we are 100 years later. But the technology, the economy, the businesses, the dreams that we all dream, where we fly to places and work for a weekend and fly back, tow to far off distant locations to race and compete with these race cars, that it just fundamentally changes the way we have to handle a situation like this. And so we're all on pause. Some people are beginning to open up. Some racetracks are being able to open up. The idea of having crowds and large crowds is still on pause, but some bracket racing is happening, some testing. A big historic milestone down in Tucson, Arizona, the first 200 mile per hour electric run happened in a closed test session. So the desire to go fast is finding a way.
Listen, I said this in my blog this week, and if anybody doesn't get my blog, they can just send me an email at johnd, JOHND, at dragracingedge.com, and I'd be happy to just add them to our email blast that goes out every week. But in any event, drag racing is always going to be there. There's nothing, it's not going away. It really isn't. And I said this before, and I don't think this is going to happen, but let's say NHRA goes out of business. Let's say PDRA goes out of business. You're still going to have two guys who are going to line up because my car's faster than your car, and I want to beat you, okay? And you're going to have the small little tracks. I mean, I live next door to Beaver Springs Dragway here in Pennsylvania. You'll have Maple Grove, hopefully. New Media. I mean, you'll have Tucson. You'll have these places. So drag racing it's taken on a life of its own. I've said this before that, NHRA, and I guess it should be Wally Parks, it should be patted on the back, more than just patted on the back, but he's the guy that got this. He got drag racing started. He brought it out of, let's say, the dark ages and the hoodlums and whatnot, and he brought it to where we are today. But drag racing has now taken on a life of its own. And so it's always going to be there, regardless of who's in charge or what letters you put on any kind of an organization.
Yes, but we see certain things can survive and certain things can thrive, and we want to be able to thrive, like big money sponsors and people making great livings or livings doing what they dream of, versus going out. An example I hear all the time is like back in the 1960s, two guys that were plumbers could work during the day and have a top fuel car on the weekend. And maybe it wasn't the most competitive top fuel car, but they had a top fuel car and they were going racing. So now those two plumbers, they have a bracket car or a .90 car, or maybe even a stock eliminator car, but they don't have a top fuel car, because that's just not attainable with if you have a normal plumbing site. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to stereotype. There are some very big plumbing supply companies out there who can do very, very well, and we invite them to sponsor WFO Radio. Just email me, Joe at WFOradio.com. But the point is that we've seen how big it can be, and we want it to stay that size and even improve. So what can we do to learn from this time to get beyond this time and be stronger on the next wave?
Well, I mean, you're right. Yes, we do. We want it to be, you always want things better than what we have. Okay. As you say, I mean, we're in a very trying time right now. Okay. There's a lot of things that are going to change. And maybe change, modernize, I said this before, but I said this years ago, and I had a conversation with a track operator, and I said, why can't we have barcodes on these cars? And when a guy pulls into the water box, somebody goes over and scans this barcode, and all of a sudden, any information that's in that car goes to the timing tower, and it goes right into the computer system. It sounds a little far-fetched, but I mean, we're now getting into an era where we're always talking, and no longer are we going to be getting time slips. Now you get the app, you have an app on your phone, and that's where you get your time slip, which is really far-fetched to be thin with. But maybe we need to modernize. I had this conversation with Tyler Crossnow of the PDRA last week, and he said the same thing. And he's a young kid, so he's really into the technology of things. And I like the technology too. But there's still sometimes when I'd rather just have a piece of paper. We have a print magazine. I think a lot of people a lot of racers still want to read a print magazine. Hopefully, I hope it lasts for a really long time. But I mean, you got to move with the changes that we have. The times change, and you need to move with it.
That is a fact. Well, I think
maybe that's what this is all teaching us, that we now need to modernize the sport. Maybe someday you'll have cars with barcodes on them. Who knows? Well,
and I think that's both a problem and an opportunity, in that what hasn't been, I just wrote a column for the Dragster, and it's about innovation. Like this, what we're doing now is an innovation of drag racing coverage. Now, we are wanting people to subscribe to your magazine, because someone who's watching this on Facebook Live, YouTube, or Twitter, and retweeting, of course, and writing a great comment about it, and then subscribing to our podcast and patronizing all our sponsors, etc., right? They want to sit on their couch and not be digitally connected, and they want to flip through a magazine, and they want to hand it to their friend, and their friend flip through the magazine and see the cool cars and see what it is, learning tech, passing around the information. Not everybody wants to be connected to something digital, so there's room for both. The point is, innovation is part of our sport, except for the functionality of the track experience. You go to the track, you pay with some money, you receive a tech card, you fill out the tech card, you go hand the tech card to someone, they take the tech card, they hand it to someone else, they bring it to the tower, the person in the tower takes it, they don't put the information in the computer, the announcer has to just remember everything by memory, and talk about it. Like, wouldn't it be great if we figured out how to move that information from that driver to the announcer, to the track system digitally, quickly, and efficiently, so that maybe a drag racer could go to their information portal and type in, first round, had a problem. This is what the problem was. Fixed it. John DiBartlomeo came over and helped me. Thanks to John. And it automatically going to pop up on the computer. The answer is those things. If we can stream, you in Pennsylvania, me in Miami, Florida, Mike Hiner in Charlotte, and we can connect all these people through a link, we can definitely do that. We haven't wanted to do that because of a certain reason. Nobody wants these racers. They don't care. We don't need to do that. Maybe now we need to do it so that you don't touch the tech card. Hand me the tech card. Hand the other next guy the tech card. Like, what's the point of all that? And it will be better. That's where we have to get to the point that it's worth spending $10 more on entry fee. It's worth, people are going to have to spend a little more money to get these next level things. And 5 years ago, people were like, 6 months ago, people were like, we don't want to spend anything more than we have to. Now that the sport has to, I think people will be ready to do it. And I don't know if Johnny D is like frozen or he's just like a bowled.
I mean, times are changing, and
bowled over by the wind.
I'm stuck.
Yeah.
I'm stuck. Oh no, not that. I can hear all the people with flip phones going, no way, we can't do this. And I love every one of them. I mean, many of them are my friends.
Yeah. Well, there are people. That is a good point, though. We do have people in our sport that are, it doesn't make sense to me that you'll go buy the latest, greatest, whatever for your race car. Throttle stop technology has advanced. You guys talk about it in Drag Racing Edge all the time. Like, think of how throttle stop technology has advanced from a battery under the pedal to the electric thing, to the linkage stop, to the one that's like a lens of like they've advanced rapidly.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to your mobile device.
Yeah, but you can't,
the same guy won't do it. He's got a flip phone. Oh, I don't need that.
Yeah, but those, most of the guys too, while we have a fair percentage of people, small percentage that have the flip phones, there's a lot more percentage of people that hate the throttle stops and all of that, the delay boxes and everything. And sometimes we all wish we could go back to the old days, but that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
I'm against the flip.
The doors have been open.
You triggered
the doors have been open, and it is what it is. I mean, we have to move forward, and now maybe more than ever.
I think so. So who's on the cover of this latest edition? And I know you guys just did a promotion, which this is the time where people need to do promotions. I know that there are a lot of people, a lot of jobs are on pause, a lot of people collecting unemployment, et cetera, and so on. But I really think that certain things are recession proof. And one of those things is entertainment. People are going to want to be entertained. They're going to want to keep up with drag racing. They're going to want to know what's up. So who's on the cover? What's the star of the latest edition? And I know you've got that special in the rearview mirror, but maybe you don't.
Well, we did. It ended May 10th. We had a special. We came up with the idea that we should post the latest issue online, just to kind of help people out. And in doing so, which we don't normally do that. That's something that we were against only because giving it away for free, we want somebody to buy it. Spend the $24.95 for the subscription, so on and so forth. But this time we decided, you know what, let's put this one online for free. And what we did was not to alienate any of our subscribers, but we gave all of our subscribers a free extra issue. So if you, and every one of our subscribers will get one extra issue on top. So if they subscribed last month and they're due 6, they're going to get 7. We also held a special up until May 10th for the same thing. Any new subscribers that came on board, they would get 7 instead of 6. This issue had Todd Barton on the cover. Todd Barton's got some gorgeous cars. The 55 Chevy that his father has had forever, since they bought it in the early 60s. I think they got the car. and it's the same car today. It's obviously gone through a bunch of different iterations and changes and paint jobs and whatnot. And Todd paints them, Todd letters them, and he's got a gorgeous dragster too. And in addition, he's now got his son in the junior dragster. So, I mean, that was a really cool story. One of the other stories that I really liked in there was the history of the All-Star, the Carcraft All-Star Banquet. It was an amazing party, shall we call it a party, that's been around it was in 67, I believe, and it ended in 2002. It happened at Indy. It was one of those things that made Indy as famous as Indy is. So that was really cool. And we talk about a bunch of other things. We have some tech stories in there, valve spring maintenance. We also talk about head and neck restraints. I don't like talking about it, but I'm very big in safety. And I think that's one of the things we've learned over the years. You got to be safe. And the head and neck devices that racers are wearing today, that's what you wear. The foam neck collars that we thought worked years ago, that's gone. But so we try to run a gamut of a lot of things. We also got a story in there on Justin Ashley, which is a cool story too. Young kid, good family, got a great story. Let's hope we can all get back out and race again.
Simple as that, right? And none of this means a whole lot except for the racing. We do have unique and exciting people. We've got this next wave we've been cultivating coming on the scene. We've got so many great stories. I really genuinely believe that, everybody thinks their era is the best era. Like, this is not my era. I was at the track in, 1985 at the Gator Nationals. Like, I've been going a long time. I've seen a lot of errors, not as many as you though, John, but that's a different story. I think we were poised for the greatest year of NHRA drag racing that we were going to see. Like, we were on the verge, like everything was happening all at the same time, and it paused, and people are bummed. Racers want to go race, and race fans want to watch racing. Of course, NASCAR is starting back up this weekend, so we're going to have a little, four-wheel action going on. But when we get back, I think the people who have not been to a drag race in a long time are going to want to go back out and experience it, the nostalgia of it. It's so unique, the sights, the smells, the atmosphere, unlike anything else. And if nothing else is going to come out of this time, people are going to realize that things aren't automatic. Like, if you got something you like, you should go do it. The delay is just...
There's a lot of pent-up frustration. You there?
Yeah, I hear you. I see you. You look great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pent-up frustration right now. People want to go racing. As evidence of this, we had a 500-car field for a big race in Oklahoma 2 weeks ago. Wasn't even a big race. I think they paid $5,000 to win on one day. And then you had Darlington running a lot of cars last weekend. People, they want to go out and race, just like, people want to go out and go to a restaurant and sit down. I don't know what it's like down in your part of the woods there, so to speak, but everything's closed up. We can't just sit down and enjoy ourselves. And the only thing I say is that when things do open up, racetracks, restaurants, whatever, we need to go out and support them. We need to support the people who have been around for all this time.
Yeah, well, I agree. It's a complex situation, and the when do we go decision that is going to be the most difficult decision that everybody makes, right? Like, when do we go, and what are the outcomes and pitfalls and possibilities? Because there's no point in rushing out to that business to only have 6 months of quarantine because we all went too early. But that's not my call. I don't get to make that call. I just watch and hope and listen. And I'm going to go do some work related stuff next week. Like, I've made the call for myself. I have to go and try to do what's right for me at the best level that I can. And so what I'm going to do, just like you said, you're big into safety. Exactly. Like, who would go down the racetrack without a helmet? The person exists, but fortunately nowadays, well, that's why we have to have these rules, because people will show up with the wrong stuff, right? They don't care. I think people are going to do what they can do to keep themselves as safe as possible. And so we're going to live it, Johnny D, and hopefully there will be drag racing in 2050. What about the 200-mile-per-hour electric run? What do you think about that? Garlits, man, I wanted to see Garlits do it.
I'm not a big, I'm not a big electric fan, I guess, because that's cool. It's really cool that it's done. We got these electric junior dragsters too, which are, they just seem to be really cool to do, but they lack the noise.
There's no,
and for me, as a drag racer, we were hooked on, there's no noise, right? And so I don't know. It's cool to do. It's like anything else. It's something that, it's a challenge, and I'm sure Garlits looked at it as a challenge also, that, hey, listen, I think we can do it. And they do it. And that's that's racing's all about. Do I challenge you because I think my car is faster than yours? But I'm challenging you because I can go faster. What do I need to do to go just a little bit faster? In the case of bracket racing or, Top Fuel Pro Stock we talked about, what do I need to do to take my stuff to the next level, to either go faster, be more consistent? It's the challenge of doing things. That's what motorsports is all about.
There you go. Harvey says, what's up to you, John? And a lot of people excited. How do we find out about the magazine? How do we get the magazine?
How are you, Harvey?
How do we get the magazine in our inbox?
DragRacingEdge.com. You can subscribe online. If you want to get any of my blogs, you can just send me an email at johnd, @DragRacingEdge.com.
There you go. Johnny D, thank you very much for
this is
Yes.
You there?
I hear you. I see you. You look great, John.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, Joe. Thank you.
Oh, you were about to make a final point. It was going to be a great one. Go ahead.
I feel like Ricky Bobby. I feel like Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hands here.
You're doing great. You're doing great. All right. Thank you.
Good.
John DiBartlomeo with us. He's a Division I Hall of Famer, editor of Drag Racing Edge magazine. And there you go. Yeah, it's a great challenge, like everything that's happening right now. And there's probably no one right answer, like black and white, right and wrong. Everybody I talk to is battling these emotions for, you want to go out and you want to have fun and you want to resume life and you want to make money. Yes. And participate in our hobby, those of us who love drag racing. But at the same time, you wouldn't want to do something that would set us back. And how do we know when that is? And there's all these different competing voices, right? Like, oh, well, the only way we're going to find out is to do it. That's true. But then there's other competing voices that say, yeah, if you do that, things could flare up in a way that we haven't even imagined, that we have yet to see. And it's like, oh, and so I've kept my powder dry on this for a long time, and I'm going to continue to. I'm not an expert. I don't know. I'm eager to listen to all the information and make a decision for myself as best as I can. Like if it requires going to work or going to a drag race, I will make the effort to do as much as I can to participate. But at the same time, like you got to think about these tracks with these businesses. You open the doors and 1,000 people show up because the drag racers are can-do type of people, and they're going to go to the track, and then all of a sudden the track is overwhelmed and the fire marshal shuts it down, and it's a big waste of time. Like we're looking for leadership at all levels is what it is. We need leadership at all levels, and everybody who owns a track or promotes a race or is a racer should be doing everything that they can do to think about what is the best way to handle every situation. I love the fact that he's thinking about that. And the folks at Drag Racing Edge magazine have been very kind to WFO over the years. They recently had a great edition featured podcasting. And thank God he got it in there too, because it was like right before the big live streaming thing exploded. And here we are doing this. I do want to remind everybody, though, that WFO Radio is a podcast. We do unique to podcast audio only shows. And you can go on there and subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. For those of you that drive, you're over the road, you're working in a job, you can't be looking at a screen. But we do have our WFO Radio mobile app where you can see these video shows, of course, on our Facebook page, Twitter account, YouTube, etc., to listen to all that stuff. One of the other things that he mentioned, Johnny D in particular, that is near and dear to my heart. Like, I don't rant and rave too much about our sport because there's no point. It's all out of my control. Like, I'll rant and rave about certain other things, and it'll be fun. Sports, for instance, the New York Yankees, for instance, these kind of things. Like, I'll get into Ferrari and blunders made by Vettel in races. I will get on my soapbox and go nuts over certain things like that. But drag racing, I have enough knowledge to know that for every decision, there's 10 real legitimate reasons why it's not happening. But modernizing the sport is something that should happen. And someone is going to say to me, well, we can't afford it. No one's got the money now. We just went through this tremendous crisis. We just had this tremendous problem. The businesses aren't up and running and the racers aren't racing. And that is all. Yes, I get it. It's true. That's why it should have been done 5 years ago. And nobody did it. And everybody said the reason they couldn't do it 5 years ago was because 5 years before that, there was a recession and nobody's got the money and nobody wants to do it. And 10 years before that, how do we modernize the sport? Like the tech card deal, barcodes. People have been talking about that for ages. Now, I'm sure there's a very legitimate reason why it maybe hasn't happened, but I can tell you as a track announcer, just from my narrow window, the information that gets to the announcer, the method by which that happens. And I'm happy to have, Alan Reinhart, who is very helpful, and Brian Loans, who has been very helpful, and seeing the mechanisms of how it happens. But just because it's written on a tech card doesn't mean it gets to the announcer. The information, in many ways, is outdated and antiquated and old because it's onerous to get it there. Someone's got to type it all in. Let's let the racers type it all in. Let's let them change one field and update it in between rounds. Third triple O light in a row, like a little note. They'll use it. This round of racing brought to you by Drag Racing Edge magazine. Think of the value you can add. Why is every other sport trying to add value? And in bracket racing and all these other styles of racing, we participate in drag racing, we accept being technology locked because, it's just too big an investment. We just can't do it. That just doesn't seem very drag racer like. That's, my opinion. There you go. Soapbox. And some people agreeing and some people disagreeing out there. And we appreciate you guys. And thanks to Johnny D and Mike Hiner. How about Mike Hiner saving the day on the show with a little Ferrari talk? Yeah, Vettel out, Ferrari Formula One. I've seen reports that he might have already run his last race. I'm not sure about that. Now, those of you who are having a good time, tomorrow, I think it's going to be an interesting show here on WFO. Normally, I focus everything on our national and macro drag racing world. And a few weeks back, we did Wine Night with Ron Tobler, Ron Capps, Dickie Venables, John Collins, Megan Meyer, Krista Baldwin, Pat Galvin joined in. It was really just a wonderful happy hour. It's like a big cast. Tomorrow, not going to be a big cast. We've got Daryl Gwynn going to be on the show and talk about some of his early childhood drag racing experiences here in South Florida. And Miami Hollywood Speedway, the tree you see in the background, was the starting line Christmas tree for many years at Miami Hollywood Speedway. And I was able to acquire it at the last drag race in 1992. And of course, I've got it working. Now, that reaction time was done through the computer, so it's a little late, but you get the point. South Florida was a hotbed for drag racing. A lot of great people came through this area, and Jungle Jim, Coca-Cola Cavalcade of Funny Cars, Big Daddy Don Garlitz, Hector Arana spawned at Miami Hollywood Speedway. A great facility that is no more. And so what we're going to do, like, for instance, a lot of people think that the junior dragster was born in Englishtown. And there is some really legitimate evidence that it was not. That is Daryl Gwynn in the early 1980s, late 1970s in a front engine slingshot style junior dragster built by his dad at Miami Hollywood Speedway. Garlits would come in, fire burnouts. And the gentleman you see highlighted by the fire, his name is Paul Wunderlich. Paul is the guy when it comes to drag racing in South Florida. He worked at the facility for practically its entirety till it's closed, still participates in drag racing to this day. Paul is going to be on the show, share some great memories. We're going to talk about what it meant, the track. Of course, there's a joke. Look at Garlits versus the jet car there. And we're going to see some of these photographs and talk about some of these things that happen and kind of rep South Florida drag racing as a powerhouse because of our weather. Like 4-wide drag racing. You can see the lanes closest to you. Garlits is in the furthest lane. Those 2 lanes were used for 4-wide jet drag car racing. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow over a beverage, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And we invite you to be a part of it and weigh in on the show. Those of you who are fans of drag racing. Little Friday cocktails. Any final comments out there? Deep and Hawk is out there saying, what's up? Deep and Hawk doing a great job building Studebaker engines. And Mark says, how about a WFO happy hour with the guest of WFO listeners and fans with you and Alan Reinhart? I don't know about Reinhart on Friday. I think he would go for it. But that we're going to have that. That is definitely happening, Mark. And what? You guys come on the show and I send you the link and you guys pop on? Totally going to happen. The day that I am panicking for a guest, and I have no guest, that's going to happen. And so when you see that happen, and if your first thought was Joe couldn't get a guest, that's definitely not the case. It's only because I wanted to do it. No, this week, and next week we're set. Next week I'm heading up for Performance TV on Motor Trend Network, 8:30 a.m. Sunday morning. We're coming to the end of our season, and it's been a weird year so far. Hey, want to remind everybody, WFO Radio stickers. P.O. Box 848-353, Pembroke Pines, Florida. We weren't doing it for a while, but now we're doing it. And you can rep WFO, get some cool stickers. Send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, and we'll send them to you. Also, nitrofishracing.com is where you get yourself a WFO Radio t-shirt. And nitrofishracing.com, you use the promo code WFO20. And next thing you know, you're saving yourself 20% off on the WFO Radio t-shirt or other products. Big thanks to Steve Brenwald Media, doing our artwork, etc. I encourage you to follow me on Instagram and, of course, on Twitter. This is the gratuitous self-promotion portion of the show. Frank Hawley's Drag Racing School and samtech.edu. Our great friend Marvin Rodak from RodaksCoffeeandGrills.com. And I mentioned Total Seal Piston Rings. Supporting WFO, we do create podcasts for Total Seal. Hidden Horsepower, John Kazi, the most recent guest, but some really good ones coming up, including a feature on Ed Pink. All coming up on Hidden Horsepower by Total Seal. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. More and more of you are doing it. Facebook, you can watch just like you're watching, but YouTube, that's the one that ends up in the WFO Radio app. So we encourage you to do that. And podcast, subscribe, write a review, all of those things. Really appreciate all of our sponsors and the people who make WFO Radio possible. Final thought, I know that everybody out there is dealing with a challenging situation, and we're coming to the exciting conclusion, hopefully, of the challenging situation. We're feeling like we're getting to where we need to be. And I agree with that. I'm very excited that we are getting to where we need to be. But at the same time, just continue to be vigilant and consider what's out there, and you don't want to set yourself back. So you don't want to wear the mask. Wear the mask. You don't want to stay 6 feet apart because it's your buddy. You know what? Do it. Stay 6 feet apart. Because I think we're going to see in the future that's going to bring us back to where we want to be quicker and faster. Thanks to John DiBartlomeo, Johnny D, Drag Racing Edge, and thanks to Drag Racing Edge magazine for doing some great things for us, putting an ad in each Drag Racing Edge magazine so people hopefully see it and join us on the show. Let's see. Bobby Graham out there saying what's up. Other listeners saying what's up. It's good to know that there's other Ferrari Formula One fans out there in the WFO radio universe. I plan to go work on my own car at some point in the near future. Maybe start pulling some things loose and get going again now that engine shops have opened back up here in sunny South Florida. Big thanks to Mike Hiner for coming on the show. You know, Hiner, very smart guy, could be in Formula One, but he does look like Bobby Hill. Mike Hiner, Bobby Hill. Makes sense. Big thanks to Johnny D. In 2050, Johnny D would be 110 years old. Now, I don't really know. Will I see 2050? It's in question. We don't even know. Big thanks to all you WFO radio listeners out there. Thank you very much. Jeff Verdi, Pontiac. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, you got any spare parts sitting around, Jeff? Got any spare parts? You want to donate to the WFO studio? Like little stuff, like a short block? Send it. Send it, Jeff. Send it. And all you listeners, remember, tomorrow, 4 o'clock, the archive is loaded. Facebook pages are loaded. There's all kinds of content. You can get in, dial in, sign on, and be ready. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks to the sponsors for making this all possible. WFO Radio. We'll see you next time right here on the show.